Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us for this session of Giving Voice to the Silenced, shining a light on sex trafficking of girls in Santa Barbara. Very heartened by the number of people that are in this room and know from just the perspective of All Saints, this is an issue that we are very committed to, but also we think of these forums as really being a living room for the community, so an opportunity for us all just to sort of really learn and get some depth around this. I believe in the strength of community. The more people that are informed and are talking about this as an important issue, just the more it just ratchets up. And so that's something we can do. I hope you will leave this feeling informed, knowing a lot more about this, but also maybe even a next step or two that you can do yourselves. We have many inspirational people in the room, not just our speakers. So those of you who are heavily involved in this kind of work or working with the vulnerable, thank you for all that you do. I just want to name a few people that are here in attendance. We have Joe Schmidt. He's from the Santa Barbara's Sheriff's Department. Joe, where are you? Right in the back there. Thank you so much. We have Sally Cook from the founder of Hope Refuge in Olive Crest. And I know a little bit about Sally because I've been up to visit, and it's such an impressive place. But I believe you and your husband were sitting in church and heard an announcement about this, and that is where the light went off, and then since then it's been game on. So anyway, you never know when things are going to shift in your life. It could be today for you. We have Tiffany Carty from the DA's office, and is going to share with us what's happening in our wider community. Where's Tiffany? Thank you, Tiffany. We have a whole slew of people right here from Pedal to the Pacific, and they are literally putting advocacy into action. They will show you sore muscles that show you that. They have been riding from Seattle all the way down to San Diego in our days, 42, 43, somewhere in there. This happens annually, and we are kind of a stopping off point. So just thank you for all that you've done. Pedal to the Pacific has raised about $1 million for this specific issue, which is huge. So we can give them a round of applause. And you'll be hearing from them as well. And then just a shout out to our outreach committee who really were the genesis of this. Jackie McMahon, Peter Sullivan, Tracy Oakes, many others that were a part of this. Again, an important issue to us. So I'm going to turn it over to Sally and just thank you all for being here.
I'm going to take the mic so I can come down a little bit closer to everybody. Hello. Wow, what a wonderful turnout. Isn't this amazing? Yes, my name's Sally Cook. I'm one of the original co-founders of Hope Refuge Campus. I should be sharing just a little bit about that today. But it's now Olive Crest, Hope Refuge Campus. And we are here in Santa Barbara. And we are a residential facility that serves girls 12 to 18. So these girls' age. And so we are committed to seeing the recovery and dealing with the issue. But I'm so impressed that all of you have chosen not to look the other way today. You're not in front of the World Cup final. Jackie and I were a little worried when we realized, oh no, what if England win? And we're not watching it live. That would be awful. So there's a little bit of a grace there, the fact that we didn't win against Argentina. But thank you, and thank you to the committee. Yes, so I was talking with the committee many months ago, and I love what's happening here at All Saints, completely committed to being resolution and solving problems here in the community. And so today we're looking at an issue that's not easy to look at, but there's a lot of hope when the whole community comes together around it, and that is the sex trafficking of minors. In particular, we're going to be focusing on female sex trafficked minors. So today, this is what we're going to be spending our time looking at. Let's turn this on. I'm going to be taking you on a journey with Tiffany and with the girls from Pedal to Pacific, and we're going to be just trying to give you a full idea of in the little time that we have, of what is sex trafficking, why is it happening, who's it happening to, who are the vulnerable girls and boys, why are they staying in it? And so I hope you leave here today feeling a lot more informed, because then we're going to dive in deeper into what's happening locally. And Tiffany, victim witness supervisor, is going to be sharing with us some of the statistics and the realities of Santa Barbara. And then we're going to be hearing from Peddler Pacific, who have chosen to be a solution and bring what they have to the table to be a solution here. So that is what we're going to be looking at today. So just out of interest, just to see the room and get a feel for who's here, how many of you feel fairly familiar with sex trafficking of minors or have a little understanding? Okay, some of you. Okay, and obviously the rest of you are here to learn more too. So hopefully there's going to be something for everyone. But many of you did not put your hands up, and that was the same as me back in 2013. In fact, my husband and I were in the entertainment industry. I worked at DreamWorks Animation at the time. My dreams and passions were in the entertainment industry. This world of anti-trafficking was not on my 25-year plan. No, no, no. But one very divine, I call it a divine Sunday morning, we chose to go and visit a friend at their church. And whilst we were there, a lady who was in anti-trafficking, which very few people were talking about at the time in 2013. It was an overseas issue in everybody's mind. But she got up to give an announcement, maybe up there for about 3 minutes or so. But in that announcement, she shared 2 statistics that rocked my husband and I. She shared that sex trafficking of minors is now the fastest growing criminal industry here in the USA. And then she shared that the average age of entry is 12 years old. And we went, are you kidding me? So we went up to her afterwards. And I said, please tell me I heard you wrong. She went, no. Let me tell you what's happening right underneath your nose here in the streets of Hollywood. And started to tell us story after story. And that began a journey for my husband and I as we left that place and went, wow, we need to learn if this is true. And if it is, it shifts something for us. So we spent the next 6 to 8 weeks researching, deep diving onto the internet, finding out what the government is saying, what the local government is saying, what non-profit organizations are saying and doing, what's happening here, what are the girls saying, what's happening, what some of the books that are out there. We just dived in and we met with girls and boys who'd been sex trafficked, only come to the conclusion that this is modern day slavery at its worst. And so we said we're in. So let me tell you, I'm going to take you through a little bit of a journey of some of the things we found out in those 6 to 8 weeks. So the very first thing we learned that what we're talking about here is the commercial sexual exploitation of children. So it's not just sexual exploitation, this is people making money. So the definition here behind me is it's a form of trafficking when someone is trading something of value for sex with a child, a sexual act actually. So a sexual act can be prostitution as we know it, whether that's online or on the streets. All right, that's probably what comes straight to our mind. But there's more than that. We've got strip clubs. We've got massage parlors. We've got sexting, phone sex, pornography. All of that comes under this crime for something of value. And it's happening to our children. Why is this happening? Because it's big business. We have a supply and demand issue. That's the bottom line. So they're saying right now it's a $170 billion operation worldwide. So there's a lot of money to be made. Cartels and gangs are shifting from drugs to trafficking because you sell a drug once, but you can sell a girl many times. And so this is what we have. We have a buyer. And it is 99% male. So that's what we've got to look at as part of our solution. And because we have a demand, we have someone who's going to fill that demand, just like any business. I've put trafficker or pimp here. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. Often you can have someone who's in the relationship to recruit and take the child, and then they'll be handing them over to a pimp who will sell them. So they're not always the same person, but sometimes they are. And then obviously in this situation, you have the victim, which are our underage girls and boys. Okay, this is under 18 years old. So there's a demand for that. USA is now known as one of the top markets. So people aren't going to Thailand anymore. They have what they need right here. And we can maybe talk a little bit into that if we have time in the Q&A. So it's a supply and demand business. So what are the methods of recruiting? Well, let's have a look at this. I want to look at the main method of recruiting here, which is a process called grooming. So can I see a show of hands? Did anyone see the movie Sound of Freedom? Okay, some of you did. Not the easiest film to see, but it's free on Netflix right now. And what you'll start to see is trafficking in Colombia, where often children get taken, and there's a rescue operation. So the only difference is what's happening in that film isn't generally how it takes place here in America, but what you do get to see is America, the demand in America. So grooming is a very seductive process. And I've shown you here, just like a cycle, really, it's very targeted. There is a cycle that happens here. And they're, to start with, targeting young, vulnerable girls. But unfortunately, because of online, anybody is vulnerable now. It's crossing all demographics, all populations. Tiffany may speak into that a little bit. But so let me tell you about a story then that happened for one of our girls at Hope Refuge. And I'll give you an idea of how the grooming process works. She was a 14-year-old girl. She moved to Ventura with her mother and 3 siblings. And she moved there out of state. Their dad was not around. They had divorced. And so she had a single mom raising her. And she's 14 years old, heading into high school. And like any girl going to high school, really wants to make friends, all right? And she was excited about life. And when she got into the school, she was just trying to make friends. And there was a couple of girls who were 2 years older than her who befriended her. And it was very targeted. They saw she was alone at break times and lunch times. And after school, mom wasn't around. She was doing 2 jobs. She was free. And so she was hanging out with them a lot. But one Friday, they take her to a party. She goes to the party, and she meets seemingly Mr. Right. And Mr. Right is a 19-year-old boy, and he starts to treat her like the princess that she is. He's getting her hair done. He's getting her nails done. Got her a phone, which she could not afford. And then started buying other things that she couldn't afford, but really wanted to fit in as a 14-year-old young girl. And so she was getting clothes, getting shoes. He would pick her up from school. He even went and hung out with her family, her mother and her siblings. And slowly was starting to plant in her that he's the one that she should trust. And slowly starting to isolate her bit by bit. And this went on over 6 months. So for 6 months, she has seemingly found a man in her life who was filling the need for a father figure. He was older, and meeting her needs, every need. This is the key about grooming. They will meet the need. And so in this process, she fell in love, okay? And then there came a day when he said, sweetheart, I am so sorry. I have got myself into some trouble, and I really need your help. And I keep telling you how beautiful you are. All these movies and videos that you've been watching with me, because he's been letting her see more risky behavior on movies and videos and pop culture that she's into. And he went, you see the demand for beautiful girls like you. And there's a bachelor party going on tonight, and they're looking for someone beautiful. And I've offered you. Would you do that for me? Would you strip tonight? I won't let anyone touch you. I've got you there, but you're beautiful. You are born for this. Now, here's the interesting fact that we found out. In the background of this reality, 85% of victims here in the USA actually have child abuse in the background. So there is already a warping of love, sex, and authority. And so when he says, well, if you love me, it doesn't seem so far-fetched. And so she does. And that night, she stepped over a mark that she never wanted to do, but now she was drawn into some more stuff, and it got more force, fraud, and coercion, and some violence. And she found herself in a life that she did not predict that she would be in. And it got worse and worse for her. And you may be sitting there going, but clearly she saw that he's not Mr. Right. Well, put yourself in her shoes. She just wants back what she had yesterday that he'd spent, remember, 6 months plus grooming her for. So he is going to constantly be going back to that. You can hear there's similarities there with Stockholm Syndrome. And she, because of this grooming process, she does not identify as a victim. This is the worst of it. She does not see herself as a victim. In fact, she just thinks, I'm a really bad girl, got myself into a really bad situation because of the choices I'm making. And he will reinforce that. So that is the grooming process. To the point that actually one pimp maybe have actually, don't know anyone who's had more than 5 girls at a time, but they will have 3, 4 girls at a time. And they'll pit them against each other. And she is just trying to get back this great relationship she had from before. And she's a child. So her brain is still forming. She's still learning what love is. And so it's a very seductive process. And believe it or not, there's actually books on Amazon that actually train men how to do this. Now, I know. Someday we'll all buy them all and put them on Bezos' doorstep, shall we? And tell them to deal with it. So that is the main method of recruiting, is what is very different to what happens overseas in that way. However, I want you just to look at this. I'm just going to play this. This is also the reality of that it can happen online and how it can happen to children so young. It's just a short video. Online. The reality of online is really scary because they pose as someone they might know. And because all of our information is online. When we're on Facebook and Instagram and all of that, we're putting out everything there. So they know who our friends are. They know who to pretend they know, or your brother's friend. So it's very seductive. The other method of recruiting that is popular here in America, we call it the false hope, kind of pretty woman reality, where girls and boys in the entertainment industry get lured in because they want to sing, they want to be a model, right? Or they want to act. And they find themselves in situations where they show up to things and now they're asked to do something without clothes on. One of our girls actually was doing genuine modeling gigs. Actually, she was pursued for the first time they noticed her, was in a mall, in a kind of like pop-up modeling tryout thing. And he saw her passing with a group of girlfriends, got all the girls to come and take photos. It was very fun, and they really enjoyed that moment. And then he actually got her onto modeling gigs. And so she was spent about a month doing modeling gigs, didn't tell her parents, and she ended up having her headshots done. And anyone will know if you have your headshots done, they're expensive. And then he gave her the invoice. And she went, I can't pay that, and I can't tell my parents. And he went, don't worry about it. I didn't think you could. So why don't we just you come on Saturday to the next modeling gig, you do it for free, and we'll call it quits. And she went, oh, okay, I can do that. So she shows up at the next modeling gig, but this time there weren't so many clothes on. And so then he had leverage against her. And you'll find a lot of stories online about anyone in any part of the entertainment industry who found themselves being lured into something because they had a need, they had a desire, and somebody abused that. It's just a slight different side of the grooming process. We call it false hope. And then, of course, we have force where people get taken. But why take a child when you could have them there voluntarily? So that's the reality of what's happening here in the USA and why it's so hard for us to identify. So who are these victims then? Who are they going after? Well, first of all, let's make it really clear. This is the reality. When you start getting into this anti-trafficking industry, you start to realize, there obviously are more vulnerable demographics, but anybody can get caught up in this, because we all have vulnerabilities and needs. And honestly, this was something that we found in one of the books that unfortunately I had to read really to try and keep ahead of what was going on. And this pimp says, recruiting was ongoing. Repeated customers wanted variety and new faces had to be continually supplied. It's a supply and demand. So there is a reality, though, that some are more vulnerable than others. The more vulnerable a child is, the easier it is to groom them. So here's just a list of factors that can make a child vulnerable. And it's kind of scary when you look at it, because you think, oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. But I can tell you one thing at the bottom there. Any involvement in the juvenile justice system or the foster care system, you are prime target. Not having your own family who's going to be running after and searching for you makes you very vulnerable. And so that is one of the things they're doing, hanging outside group homes, hanging outside foster homes. We're ready to be that knight in shining armor. When you're ready, I'm here, sweetheart. And of course, they're going to have a triggered moment, and they were out there being taken. But you can see here, anything can come up here, particularly being left behind in the educational system. There's more grooming happening in schools. We're all trying to, at the Human Trafficking Task Force, do a lot more work in training to identify. But you can imagine someone who's behind, someone who doesn't fit in, someone who's on their own, it's in the recess, they're looking for them. I do want to pick up boys, just briefly here. Boys actually make up for 15% of trafficking here in the USA, believe it or not. Here's the difference. They tend not to have a pimp. Boys don't get controlled by men. Isn't that interesting? So they're more likely in it for survival. So they need a bed, they run away, they need food, they need help, and they get lured into it that way. There's quite a lot of research done on this because of the smaller group, and 95%, this is disturbing, of all sexual exploitation of boys is by an adult male. And that's what tends to bring them into the commercial side, because they're like, well, I can make money out of this. So boys also are victims. And then another unique group that we can't ignore is the LGBTQ plus community. They actually make up for 40% of the homeless population. And the homeless population, any child who's homeless, is incredibly vulnerable. So that is worth noting. Red flags. Okay, let me just go back. I want to highlight the red flags here, because this is the thing. We all are starting to go, oh, well, how do I know? If they don't identify, if they're not coming forward going, I need some help, how do I know? How am I going to know if it's my granddaughter, my niece, my own daughter, someone I know, next door neighbor? How am I going to know? Well, let's get this young man to tell us. Don't know if we want to dim the lights or not.
Today, if you saw somebody chained to a post, you would do something about it. But in the days of the transatlantic slave trade, it was a normal sight to see. It isn't as clear today of what modern slavery looks like. But by knowing the signs of human trafficking, you can help protect yourself and you can help protect others. Traffickers would often brand their victims with tattoos, using words such as daddy or cash. Trafficking victims may show sudden changes of dress and behavior. They may suddenly have possessions that they usually can't afford. They may have unusually long work hours. Victims may have new relationships with boyfriends or girlfriends that are noticeably older, and I'm not talking about a few years. Difficulty with making eye contact, especially with men. Victims may have untreated medical problems, such as cuts, bruises, burns, broken bones. They may miss school frequently, make frequent trips. Victims may be unable to speak independently. Other people may insist on answering questions for them, or even translating for them. Victims may even be frightened of authorities, seeing them as the bad guys. To request help.
Okay. So red flags. Those are some of the key red flags, as we have here. And red flags, what they do is they just go, hang on a minute, this is behavior that I just need to keep an eye on. And it's all about, all you'll read, whenever you read anyone's story who's ever got out of trafficking, who's ever found help that they need, is always one unjudgmental hand at a time. One loving, unjudgmental hand at a time. You've got to remember the pimp's working hard to block the relationships around them, right? So they're the only one that they need. And so the moment they feel like they're, with a lot of our girls, what we're training in schools is that the counselors will just keep asking questions. I've noticed you're showing up with brand new clothes, Coach bag. This is awesome. Where'd you get that? How'd you get that? Da, da, da. And just keep questioning. Who brought that for you? Why did he buy that for you? And you're getting it out. But the moment she shuts down, back off. Back off. Well, just know that I'm here for you if you need me. Because there will come a day. There will come a day. But putting information in front of them going, I think you're being trafficked. I can see you've got all the signs, read this. They're just going to shut down. So it's relational, very relational. One of the things I do want to note just down the bottom one, withdrawn, depressed, fearful, crying, or more confident, depending on where they're at, will depend what's happening to them. So if they're in the earlier days of being groomed, can you imagine how amazing they feel? All the attention they're getting, all the gifts, being love bombed on, getting to go to parties they would never do otherwise, getting to be amongst friends they feel so excited to be a part of. They're going to feel amazing. They're going to be really confident. So it's not just about being withdrawn. Later on, when they're starting to have to do things they don't want to do, stay out late, do things at night, hide who they are, shame sets in. Shame is a powerful trigger to keep you hidden. Then you're going to start getting them more withdrawn and fearful and stuff. So it really depends, okay, where they're at. One of the things you noticed that he said in that was the branding that happens, right? They're branding the girls. Majority of the girls who come to Hope Refuge have a tattoo of some kind that's branded. One of the girls she's still getting it done. Shirley's a mentor with our girls, yeah. And there is laser removal, but it's a painful process and a long process and an expensive process. So those are some of the key things that you need to know just to be aware. But I want to just hone in a little bit more now on Santa Barbara, the local issue. Tiffany's going to be coming up in a minute just to give you some of the key things that are happening. But I wanted to let you know that in Santa Barbara, the question back in 2014-15, Joyce Dudley was district attorney, and their question was, do we have trafficking here? Where is it happening? Who's it happening to? And so how do we find out? Well, why don't we work with the demographic we have in juvenile hall at the time? We have a captive audience, right? Let's work at the juveniles we have and see what's going on. Well, after this needs assessment, okay, so they did a whole needs assessment in the hall only. And in that time, they found they had 35 identified victims, 235 high potential. Remember, they don't identify. And they knew, whoa, we have an issue here in Santa Barbara. Why? Well, for various reasons, we're a corridor town between the highest grossing areas, Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego. So there's movement up and down. Not only that, we have tourism, hotels. This is big business here. And there's money here. This is a good place. So it is definitely happening here. And one of the things they found in that needs assessment was, one, we don't know how to identify, so we've done a lot of work on that. Two, we need programs that are focused in on trauma. Because here's the problem. If you don't have a program that focuses, it goes after the girl's trauma, and you can imagine it's complex when you've been commercially sexually exploited, then they end up in all the wrong places because of their behaviors. If they act out, they'll be ending up in juvenile hall. If they internalize, they'll be ending up in a psych ward. Maybe they'll be ending up in a rehab center. Maybe they'll be ending up in a group home because they're running. All of which does not address trauma. So the behavior just keeps going in a cycle. And so that is what Hope Refuge, we were part of the solution for the issue we had here in Santa Barbara and California. There are actually only 511 beds in all of the United States to serve this population with going after trauma. Can you believe that? And we're saying 325,000 or so are getting caught up a year. So we have a big problem. And that's what Hope Refuge is. This was founded to be a solution. So we are the highest level of care we can give in our state. We are a licensed facility, and we are a residential treatment program. So it's all based around the clinical care, individual therapy, rehab and behavior specialists, equine therapy, the school on site. So everything's up there. And it's a time to get away, detox, come off phones. The only computer access they have is for their school, finding themselves again. And so here is a huge impact that this has on the emotional, the physical, and the spiritual state of a child. And so rather than me tell you about that, I'm just going to have one of our girls from a video share her experience at Hope Refuge, and you'll get to hear some of what she came in with.
I'm a resident of the Olive Crest Santa Barbara Hope Refuge campus. Before coming here, I felt really drained and just like overworked and just like done with life, because just everything that I've been through like was taking a toll on me, and it just kept hitting me and hitting me. My past was really hard. Said I had a good upbringing, but I made some wrong choices, and my mom wasn't really there, so I kind of like didn't have enough guidance. So I got around the wrong people, and I went through experiences that nobody should have gone through. And I remember a time where I looked in the mirror and I literally forgot like who I was. I was like so hurt, and I kind of did like turn into somebody that I wasn't, because I like forgot I had a family. Like I was doing drugs. It was just like a really hard experience. I was in a relationship that like tore me to pieces, but I got tired of that and I wanted better for myself. So I just put my mind to it, and I literally woke up one day and I'm like, I can't keep going through this pain and this hurt and like not knowing my identity. I wanted to find me back. I came here when I was 13, and I thought it was like a good placement, but I wasn't ready to commit and like focus on like my life and creating goals and everything. But now I'm back here at 18 and I finished my program, and I'm just doing great now. When I first got here, I felt a little uncertain because the path that I was on wasn't good, so I didn't know if I was gonna like be able to get out of it. But once I like met everybody and I started feeling comfortable, I was like, okay, like these people have my best interests. I just like leaned into them and they helped me. Therapy was hard at first. It like got overwhelming because I had to relive the experiences that I've never wanted to relive because it was just really terrible. But after a while, I felt relief, and I just felt like a peace like never before. Some fun activities and memories that I have here is going on outings, like to the beach, having barbecues, like kickboxing class. We have these church events that we go to, which are really like fun. And going down with David, he just makes everything so much fun. So I love going on the swing, so I have a lot of fun memories there. I enjoy on my free time walking up to the goats and hanging out with Daisy, because she's just like a dog. And I just love animals so much, and they just like make me happy, and especially just like being able to like nurture them. It just feels good. Being up here is really a blessing because the views, like a lot of people don't get to experience that, but we get to experience that for free. My favorite part of the day is probably like the evening, because the sunsets are so nice and beautiful. When I first graduated high school, I was like, I didn't believe it, because I never would have thought that I could like reach that kind of goal. But it just took like time and perseverance and just like me really wanting it. I'm really excited about having my driver's license because it just gives me the power to, like get in from a job. Like, I love traveling, so now that I have a driver's license, I can go wherever I want and just be free. When I got my job, it was like really nerve-wracking and scary, but it was like so worth it. When I was younger, like I didn't feel wanted, but having a job, like your coworkers need you. I'm looking into this job. It's a dental hygienist. One of the reasons why I want to get into the healthcare field is just I love helping people and being around people and just like making them better. Something else I would want the other girls to know when they get up here is it's going to be hard. It's going to get kind of depressing because you're isolated. It's not like a regular experience. You're like away from your family. You have to wait 30 days to get off the mountain, but after a while you will realize that it's worth it, and this isolation is like a chance to renew yourself and just to do better and just like block out like any negativity. I know I shouldn't question God, but I question God, like, why would you put me these things if you love me? But then I got here, and after a while I started reading my Bible more, and I just started praying, and I feel like the time away from society and just the negativity really helped me regain my relationship with God. How I would describe myself today is just very strong and resilient, compassionate, and I'm a very outgoing person, and I feel like I'm personable, and I just have this motivation and just peace. Something I'm excited for in the next chapter of my life is just being independent and creating a new me, because I need it, and I think it's time that I leave my past in the past and just be able to move on and meet new people and create a good community. I just want to say thank you to all my support group and just everyone who believed in me and never gave up on me, because without you guys, none of these kids here, or even myself, wouldn't be who we are today. My name is Ashna, and I'm graduating the program, and I believe everything happens for a reason.
Bless her. She did awesome, didn't she? So there is hope here in Santa Barbara, coming out of some of these harder things that we're learning today. But I want to hand over to Tiffany now, because I really want you to hear more about the realities here in Santa Barbara. Tiffany is Victim Witness Supervisor at the District Attorney's Office. So they're actively prosecuting and working in cases constantly. I'm going to put some statistics up, and then I'm going to hand it over to you. Tiffany.
Thank you. I have no idea how to follow up after Sally, though, so bear with me, guys. I don't have a full slide deck. But my name is Tiffany Carty. I supervise the Victim Witness Program, as Sally shared, at the District Attorney's Office. And I also serve as our human trafficking advocate and subject matter expert. So to just give you a little bit about my background, I originally started working in the issue in Las Vegas, Nevada, in Clark County. As I'm sure you can imagine, I saw a lot in my 10 years out there. And then from there, I went out to DC and realized, oh, wow, this issue looks the same here in DC. It's just slightly different because of the geographics of that location. And I worked there with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, working specifically with the Exploited Children Division for about 4 years. And then I had the joy of coming out here to Santa Barbara about 3 years ago to take this position, and I'm very happy to be here. But I will tell you that, again, I have found the issue still looks a lot the same, just with slight geographic differences. So one thing Sally had mentioned here locally is that we're a corridor. And that has a lot to do with the frequency of trafficking here. The 101 shoots straight up the coast. And so our traffickers are moving up and down the coast, across to Vegas, back to LA, up and down the coast. In one day, we were curious because these numbers, while they represent some of what we're doing, they're only a sliver, right? We went on and we searched for ads for Santa Barbara County. And in one day, we found over 27,000 ads were posted for purchasing victims of trafficking. So I just want to point out that though it gets reported, it is not by any means reported at the quantity that it is actually happening. But just to give you some of the numbers, we've got the full one here. If you guys want to come over, you can see it. But they did a study of our stats from 2015 to 2025. And these are law enforcement stats. So just a slight disclaimer there, this does not include the nonprofit organizations that have received reports that have not come to the district attorney's office. But we did identify 279 survivors over that period of time. And there's some interesting things about the survivors that we discovered. So 92% of what was identified was sex trafficking victims. One thing about that, there is a lot more labor trafficking happening in Santa Barbara County than we're identifying, but that is something that the task force is working towards better identification and helping those victims as well. 97% of our females were victims who were female, and 28% of them were under the age of 17. So 28% doesn't sound like a lot until you think about the fact that it's a fourth of the victims under 17, and then another fourth between the ages of 18 to 24. Most of those 18 to 24-year-olds entered at 12 or 13 years old. And 38% of them are Santa Barbara County residents, which a lot of people don't expect. 93% of them are citizens of the United States. So I think a lot of times people think of it as a big issue with foreign nationals, but the reality is it's our kids. It's our community's kids that this is happening with. The way the district attorney's office works with advocates is really crucial. So the role of our program, our advocates go on site. So if the law enforcement officers are doing a sting, for example, and they're trying to pick up a trafficker or pick up Johns, a lot of times they'll have myself or our North County advocate, Bionette, on call, and we will come on scene and we will talk to that victim because we're pseudo law enforcement. We're a softer touch, you know? We're not coming in guns blazing, so they tend to be a little bit more open with us. We also connect them with resources, and that's where Sally and I do get to work together a decent amount. But one of the main things we do is we identify the need, right? Because when you find a survivor of trafficking, she does not want to think about the criminal case. She does not want to talk to law enforcement, and she probably thinks she doesn't need help. She thinks that she is not a trafficking victim. She chose this life. And so when we're first engaging, the whole thing is relationship. So I may meet a young lady, and I'm not here to teach her that she is a sex trafficking survivor. Not my job. Hopefully we'll get there, but not my job. What we're going to talk about is, does she have housing? Does she have food? What does she need right now? Does she need a bus pass to go home? Does she want to go home to Sacramento? Go home to wherever she's from? Does she have a way to do that? Do her parents know where she is? Does she have a safe place to go? And so a lot of times what that looks like is me buying them McDonald's, nuggets and fries, sitting down, having a conversation, getting them a bus pass to go back home, since now their trafficker is in lockup. With that, we can build the relationship. So now this individual will start to trust me, and we can continue to have ongoing conversations about needs, and I become sort of a mentor to the individual. From there, there's gonna come a day that she's ready. And it takes time. For all of them, it takes a different amount of time. We know the average domestic violence survivor returns to their abusive partner 7 to 9 times before they successfully leave. Can you imagine with human trafficking how high that number is? There's a lot more dynamics to it than just domestic violence. So the tie, the trauma bond is really strong. But there will come a day. And when that day comes, I usually get the text. And that's what I call it, the text. I got the text from so-and-so. But that text is, can I come in your office and talk to you? Can we meet? Sure, absolutely. And then the next thing you know, they're in my office sobbing, telling me their whole life story, and they're finally ready. And we can really work with them then. But the thing I really want to emphasize with, because, you know, answering how do we solve this is kind of a big thing to try to answer, okay? I cannot single-handedly end human trafficking in Santa Barbara County, if you didn't know. But the big thing really is relationship. It's relationship. So how we're handling it in the county is relationship. We have the Santa Barbara Human Trafficking Task Force. Law enforcement participates. You know, the California Highway Patrol, Santa Barbara Police Department, Santa Maria Police Department, the Sheriff's Office. We all come together at the same table and we discuss the cases we're seeing. And what we find is that these kiddos have seen everyone but one time. So nobody knows that everybody else knows a piece of the story. So what'll happen is maybe the California Highway Patrol officer at that task force meeting will say, hey, you know, I pulled over this car and I noticed something odd. It just didn't sit right. The youth's name was this. I didn't really know what to do. And then B, the other human trafficking advocate, will chime up and go, well, actually, I had a conversation with that young lady because she was at Noah's Anchorage. And so we talked to her then. And then the next thing you know, Good Samaritan is going, oh yeah, and she dropped in at our drop-in center and so the next thing you know, we've all had interactions with her. We just didn't know. And so the Human Trafficking Task Force keeps us all connected. It keeps us in relationship, and it keeps us communicating about what we're seeing. It also keeps the community organizations in the loop. So we're frequently working with NOAA's Anchorage, which is primarily for homeless youth. However, they have a CSEC case manager now, and a lot of their kiddos are at risk, if not already having been trafficked. To Sally's point about the homeless youth, we know that over 70% of them are trafficked within 48 hours of hitting the street. So that's a huge vulnerability. And NOAA's is helping to address that because they can go there, they're extremely low barrier, right? We're working with Good Samaritan. They have a human trafficking shelter. Working with Olive Crest, working with Child Welfare Services, STESA, the Rape Crisis Center. So it keeps us all in relationship. We are building relationships with the girls. That is how you do it, quite frankly. We don't rescue them, just for the record. What we do is we empower them to make the choice to leave, and then we support them on that journey. But when we are doing that, it's based on relationship. So I think a lot of people think about trafficking like, I need to fix this huge, big problem out there. It's so big, it's so massive. What's the biggest thing I can do to help? But the reality is, while that is true, and it's big and it's huge, and there's all these big things that need done, the way we stop it in this county is relationship. So I don't know what gifts God has given you. I don't know, if you have the gift of generosity, if you have the gift of hospitality, the gift of mentorship, leadership, but you have a gift. There's something in your life that you can leverage in the context of a relationship to help a young girl, right? So whether that's like Shelly, being a mentor to the girls up at Olive Crest and spending time with them, maybe you volunteer with the Interfaith Collaborative and you help, put together the backpacks that our office uses when we go out on those emergency calls at night. Maybe it's doing tabling with me at some event because I ended up getting tucked in at the last minute. You just never know. So you can volunteer with your time. There's always a need for funding. So let me just say that right now. I know a shameless plug for money when I see one, but as you can imagine with the current political climate, a lot of funding has been cut. Funding for almost every organization that is doing this work has been cut, and they are struggling. And so that includes us. We're very blessed that we have, other sources and state government funds, but especially your nonprofits. They're hurting. So if you have that gift, give that gift. That helps. It genuinely helps. But just notice the kids around you. Notice if you're a teacher and they're at school and they're falling asleep at their desk and they can't stay awake, ask what's going on. Talk to the kiddo. If they're suddenly in all new nails, new shoes, talk to them. Be around them. Build a relationship with them. If they trust you, you may eventually be able to help them, right? They need to trust you, and that comes with time and relationship. So that's really, I would say, beyond the relationships, the only other thing I would really say, please do, is pay attention to policy, okay? Because the policies that are being passed at the local level, the state level, the federal level, they impact us. They impact this work. There was recently a big push to make purchasing a child for sex a felony. I don't know if anyone paid attention to that. That was here in California. It was a state level policy. And we pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, right? It had the backing of the elected DA, John Savernock. It had the backing of multiple DDAs, multiple counties. It didn't pass. It didn't pass because the legislature wanted a designation for the age of 16. They wanted to say it's a felony if they're under 16, but it's still a misdemeanor if they're 16 or 17, because they're older, right? They can consent. No, they can't. By definition, a child cannot consent to a commercial sex act. But also, when they're being groomed, that's also not a choice, right? Like, they think it's a choice, but they're not making a choice. They're under coercion and manipulation. So it didn't pass, but there's another effort. We're building the momentum. We're trying to get it passed. Pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on with legislation with the internet, right? Because right now we're seeing kind of a reckoning with social media, AI generative technology, all of that. Those things impact this issue. So if you have a heart for policy, write letters, advocate, go speak. You all have a gift and you all have a way to be in relationship with someone, and that's how you're gonna help, okay? It's not some big, massive thing. It's just a relationship, but yeah.
Amazing, Tiffany. We are so blessed to have Tiffany here in Santa Barbara with all of her experience and in the role that we have. It's very unique. And so thank you, Tiffany. She's going to be up here at the end as well, answering any questions that you might have. So I am going to bring Caden and Sendri. Is it? Who's coming up? Caden's going to come up. We just wanted to close off this time before the Q&A so you can see what some people are doing with their gifts and are trying to be a solution here. So please tell us about Pedal the Pacific and what you're up to.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Pitcock. I am our program director for Pedal the Pacific. And I wanted to share just a little bit about what we're doing, and then I will pass it over to two of our riders who are actually riding bikes from Seattle to San Diego to fight this issue that you've all heard about today. Before I go into Pedal the Pacific, I want to encourage every single one of you that are here. One, thank you so much for being here. This is so inspiring to see dozens of people from the Santa Barbara community here, literally to learn and to understand this issue more, and then hopefully take it back to your friends, your families, and your network. So my encouragement to you is every single one of us from Pedal the Pacific, Tiffany, Sally, we all had a day where we learned about this issue. We all had a before knowing about sex trafficking and an after and beyond. And I very clearly remember my day when I heard about this egregious issue, my very first time hearing a survivor's story, and I remember the feeling of just the stirring in me to not turn a blind eye, to tell the stories of survivors, to share about what I had just learned. And so I want to acknowledge that everything that's been shared is very heavy. Like, it's not an easy thing to hear about at all. And so it may kind of stop you in your tracks and freeze you for a second. But I want to encourage every single one of you to stay there for a minute and sit with what you've heard, but not let yourself stay frozen and not let yourself stay stopped in your tracks. If that's for a moment, if it's for a day, if it's for a week, sit with what you've heard, but then keep moving forward and take everything that you've learned today and share it with your spouse, your family, your children, your friends. When they ask what you did this weekend, tell them about what you've learned. Because I believe it was you, Sally, this conversation wasn't happening to the magnitude that it is today, 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. And that's because people chose to tell the stories and people chose to share what they had heard about. And so you all can be part of that today by taking what you've heard and what you've learned and going and sharing it. And so with that, that's exactly what Pedal the Pacific exists to do, is to tell these stories, to be a vehicle for advocacy and fundraising for organizations that are doing the work. We ourselves are not changing policy or lobbying, but we are traveling on bikes from Seattle to San Diego to talk about this issue and to share the work that's being done in the communities that we're passing through, the communities that all of these girls are coming from. And our program is that bike ride for college-aged women to become like I said earlier, the vehicle for change and for advocacy. And ultimately, in my mind, for prevention. The issue that exists today is so large that, like Tiffany was saying, how could one person put a stop to it? But I like to use this analogy. If everyone on Earth was doing prevention to 100% capacity, then trafficking would never happen because it's being prevented to its fullest extent. And that's a utopia idea to have, but if each of us can be just a speck of that, it adds up quick. And so I want you to get to hear from 2 of our riders today, but also Pedal the Pacific was started by 3 friends who heard about trafficking and said, we can't turn a blind eye to it. We're stopped in our tracks and we need to move forward. How are we gonna do that? We're gonna do something that's gonna turn heads and start conversations. And so we have teams of riders who were not cyclists before. So their communities are asking, you're not a cyclist. Why are you riding your bike 1,700 miles? And then we can tell them to fight sex trafficking and then tell them about the realities. So this is our version of advocacy. This is our version of stepping forward. And while this isn't everybody's version, I want to encourage each of you to think about what could my version look like in my community with my resources and abilities. So I want to invite up 2 riders. We're going to hear from Cadence and Cedri, and they'll tell you a bit about their journey and their story. Yeah, whoever's coming first. Oh, shit. Yeah, that's probably good.
Hello? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, where am I gonna start? Okay. Well, I'm gonna start with telling you a bit about my journey with advocacy. Louder? How's this? Oh, I gotta be close. Okay, gotcha. I grew up thinking that trafficking was a distant issue until a dear friend of mine did Pedal the Pacific in 2023. And she emboldened me to learn more about trafficking, and I also just saw the way that she put her heart into something like never before. And so I saw how much she cared about it, and I wanted to too. And so I learned that this is not an issue that's far removed from my life, and this is an issue that impacts people in communities all around. And that reality is exactly why the work can't be left to a handful of experts. It requires all of us to do what we can to cultivate a world where no one is sold. Throughout this experience, Pedal the Pacific has shown me that truly any person in any position can become an advocate. In the last couple of years, the more I was learning about trafficking, the more I was left feeling heartbroken and honestly angry at times. I wish that more people in positions of power were doing more to end trafficking once and for all, but I also learned it's way more complicated than that. And I also learned that sometimes it's those very people with status or power who are perpetuating it. Yesterday, we had the privilege of meeting with a survivor who shared her disappointment in systems, the juvenile and law enforcement, that are made up of people that have the responsibility to protect our youth, that in reality failed her. I don't think I have the words to really sum up the anger I felt in that moment, but listening to her more, though, helped me channel this anger into something else. She said something that really stuck with me. All little girls have such bright futures, but for the girls like us who have been in the life or are still in the life, we just have to go through a lot more to get there. And all of us here today can be involved so that every kid gets the opportunity to live their bright future. As I said, advocacy isn't just for the policy experts or the people who are willing to testify before Congress. Truly, anyone in any position can find a way to talk about this. And this can look like talking to your kids about healthy relationships or connecting your circle to organizations like the North County Rape Crisis and Child Protection Center or Olive Crest that are working to prevent exploitation by educating their community and providing support services to survivors directly, and all the ways that Tiffany just mentioned as well. Each of you that's here right now is exactly what the anti-trafficking movement needs. You don't necessarily need a specific job position. You just need to show up for your community with curiosity, the willingness to listen, and the desire to make your community one where every person feels safe and knows they matter. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Cedri. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm originally from the Nashville, Tennessee area, but I actually currently live down the road in LA and I just graduated from Pepperdine. In my education, I took a colloquium series focused on social action and justice and community organizations based in Southern California. In the classroom, we studied forms of injustice of the past and the present and would learn and collaborate with different nonprofits in our area. In every situation, every person I met, every story I heard, intersectionality played a role. Intersectionality is the idea that identities are not singular, but they overlap to form unique individuals. Race, ethnicity, economic background, ability, sexuality, language, all of these things are not individual from each other, but build upon. Trafficking, too, involves these layers and is multifaceted as well. While we're on our bikes and while we've made our way down the coast, we've had people stop and share their stories and thank us for what we're doing. This means so much to us and helps us keep going. Yet, after studying nonprofit systems in schools and fighting for other causes, part of me has always wondered, am I really making that much of a difference? Imposter syndrome for me creeped in early on. Not only was I incredibly novice and unskilled on my bike, but I also didn't know if I was actually the change maker that I saw in each of my teammates. I think that sex trafficking is a daunting issue, as Tiffany mentioned, because of this intersectionality piece. When you address sex trafficking, for example, you also could be addressing economic issues. You also could be addressing systematic issues, and so on. Yesterday in Lompoc, as Cadence mentioned, we had the opportunity to meet with a survivor, and she told her story and told us about some of the misconceptions that she often hears from people outside of the life. She was brave, bold, and strong, and I know that she will make a difference with her story. This survivor, among others, is who I'm writing for, and that has been a driving force for me to continue this fight. These stories make the fight worth it, and I would go as far as saying I would do it again for these women. I am riding my bike because I think that all people have inherent dignity and are deserving of respect. Therefore, any effort that I make is valuable because all people are valuable. As we enter into our last week, I'm happy that I have a new view of advocacy. I do not have to solve every inequity or to solve every problem within these 50 days of writing, but I do have the ability to raise funds, to raise awareness, to show care, and to start the conversation. Thank you all for being a part of our conversation as well.
Thank you so much, Cadence and Cedri. And you've seen the back of all of them for the last hour, but could you guys all stand up? Amazing. You can sit down. Thank you all for being here. On behalf of Pedal the Pacific, we're so, so grateful for your community and that you would come here to learn today.
Wonderful, wonderful. Oh my goodness, girls. 1,700 miles. That's a lot. Wow. Respect is due. Well, they're here. We have Tiffany here and myself. We just want to give the last 5 minutes or so over to you. I know there must be some questions amongst you that we'd be more than happy to answer. Q&A is really important. We want to encourage you. If you're like, what do I do? Actually, what's the first thing you can do? What we did and what we encourage people, dive in with those who are already doing something. And we want to encourage you just to come and do a tour, maybe, of Hope Refuge. Many of you have been up to do a tour, and it's a chance just to learn a little bit more. And you start to think, oh, maybe these are the things I could do when I go back. We are off Refugio, 7 miles up off Refugio, up by the Reagan Ranch. So we are remote, and that's part of the advantage. I have actually, we've got some boards around. I think was someone going to give those out. And they're going around, and you can just sign up for a tour. We'll just get in touch, and we'll work out a time for you to come up and do a tour. You can volunteer, obviously give, but obviously we've got this wonderful organization here too that people can get involved with. But whilst things are going around for you to sign up for tours and things like that, let's answer some questions. Is there any burning questions that people have? Janet, hello. Brilliant. So Janet, thank you, wife of the mayor here today, who asked a very pertinent question. The big sporting events that happen here in America and overseas, they are a prime place for targeting, for grooming girls, for trafficking. So the demand is high. Super high. So when it comes to actually big events, the Super Bowl being one of the prime times when people are taken, they're not just grooming, they could be grooming, they're grooming for years towards that, and then before that, they're just taking. They're just getting girls drunk, putting something in their drinks, and they're taking them. It's getting even a little worse. We've had a couple of girls up to Hope Refuge who were in that situation, and they were tagged. They literally had put a tracking tag in them so they could track where they were. So when law enforcement found them, or if John took them off somewhere, they were going and getting them because they were money, they were commodity. So yeah, you need to be aware that at all of these events, we all need to have our eyes open and be aware that just because girls look happy at these events doesn't necessarily mean they're with their father or their brother. So it's just the awareness piece there. A lot of work's being done by that. Law enforcement have upped the ante big time for those events too. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about that, Janet? No. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Jackie.
Yeah, she was asking how our program works with the schools and if we're doing anything in the schools. So what I will say is right now that is primarily a focus of a subsect of our task force. I know you're involved with that part, but they are working on getting into schools and doing trainings. One thing I will say that I would love to see incorporated here was when I was in DC, there was an age-appropriate curriculum that we had managed to get into some of the Maryland schools, because DC it's a funky jurisdiction because it's like this little triangle, and you have Maryland, DC, Virginia. The girls are being trafficked back and forth across the 3 borders. But they had this curriculum for kiddos as young as 6, but it was very age appropriate. Like, it was not anything traumatizing or too much. And they were able to get that into some of the schools. The challenge is that, quite frankly, it's very hard to get good sex education into the schools, let alone good sex trafficking education into the schools. So I think it's part of a broader conversation, but we are working on that. There is a program in the schools now that is working to identify kiddos and give them kind of like a step plan to try to get caught up on school and connect them to resources. So I think that's a start, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done there. Anything you want to add? I know you...
Yeah, the task force did actually do a pilot up in Lompoc, where the school, the high school up there was trained, the counselors and teachers at different levels, with a lot of role play and how to actually work with the girls when they identify them, how to report, what kind of reporting you're doing, what are you saying, which was great. And we're talking with Susan Salcedro about getting that rolled out. That's going to take time. We've been going in personally, actually doing grooming wherever anyone will let us in front of kids. We're going in and actually got a great workshop that just gives them an opportunity to look at grooming. So they can keep themselves girls your age, keep yourself safe and your friends safe. And it's fascinating because I know when I start and I'm sharing about trafficking, just the first 5 minutes, they're like, oh, that's someone else. Oh, that's those girls. After they've done the workshop, they're like, whoa, that could be me. I'm on Instagram. I have a soccer coach. I was here, you know, all of these things. They're like, oh my goodness. So it's very eye-opening. So if you have a youth group or anything, we're trying to just share that around and give those resources away so people can do that. But yes, it needs to be. There's a lot more to do, unfortunately. And actually what it does is it's highlighted, we have a lot of gaps in our system. And so the nonprofits and other organizations, Olive Crest is trying to get more positioned to fill some of those gaps. So when schools are reporting, we know we've got grooming going on here, we can see this is happening here. Well, CPS isn't picking it up because it's not happening in the home, it's not a case they can pick up, and so who is advocating there? So we have some more work to do, but we're all attempting to meet the needs. Yes? Right. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. What's your name? Eric. Eric very wisely brought up, hang on, we only have this issue because we have a demand. So there are a few things. Tiffany might want to speak into this a bit. My husband actually is part of a group of people right now who are working on some legislation for the porn industry. So we believe that porn industry is the fuel. It's the rocket fuel behind the fact that men are wanting children. And they've been feeding this for a long time. And our boys are now being raised on porn, and girls, because of the access we have. And so there is already legislation. You can't just go into a 7-Eleven and go and buy a porn magazine unless you give them your ID, that you're 18 or over. Well, the aim is now to increase that legislation to the internet. So that's taking some time. There's been some stuff trying to be done around it before, but it was very complicated. And the moment you make something complicated, it's hard to enforce. But these are conversations men need to be having. And it is a symptom of the issue in our culture. I don't know whether we say this is I've heard people say, oh, is this the result of the fatherless generation? Probably. But we're all included in that conversation, aren't we? So, Tiffany, is there anything you want to speak into that?
I just want to highlight an organization in the context of that conversation. They're called the EPIC Project, and it's spelled EPIK. They've incorporated multiple locations in some major cities. Hopefully we can at some point bring them here. But it's actually a group of men, and they have set up a website that looks very realistic, that looks like men can go and purchase. And so they call these ads that they're viewing. And instead of getting, the victim or the trafficker on the other end of the line, it's men who are answering these phones almost like call center style. And they try to engage them in the conversation. And of course, there's a lot of men who hang up on them. But then there are others that will have the conversation, and they'll talk to them about what is making you want to purchase? What are you watching at home? Man to man, have you thought about this aspect? Have you thought about maybe that 13-year-old and what her life is like and what her experience is like? And they're having those conversations. And then one of the ways that they have been very helpful in the cities that they are in is that they have an agreement with law enforcement where the top 5 callers, let's say, who are repeatedly repeating, calling and calling and calling to buy, they will provide that information to law enforcement to try to get the top buyers off the street to kind of decrease some of the quantity. And so they're doing really amazing work, and it's a male-led organization, and I just want to pin them for anybody who is seeking a way to start having those conversations.
It's really good. It's really good. One of the things that's worth noting about porn, particularly for our kids, is that it's super addictive. So it has to grow. Just like drugs, what was satisfying earlier on with just maybe a Playboy magazine, it eventually will grow. And so even though not everyone who watches porn will end up buying a girl, everyone who gets caught for purchasing a woman or a child has a story with porn. Kent.
The issue of the demand is something personally that I'm very interested in. And there's a local group, it's actually a national organization, Pure Desire. And there's a local chapter here or a local group. And so if you know a young man or a man, or anybody who has been dealing with porn addiction, it's a really great program. It is faith-based, but basically there's a whole program. It's like a 10 or 11 week program that you go through. And it is really powerful and really effective. So yeah, if you're interested, I'll just be around towards the end, and I can give you the contact information for that program.
Super helpful. See, all these resources. Yes?
I would like to know the names of the books on Amazon that are training the grooming.
Pimp Bible and Pimpology are two you can start with. Come on, I'm backing you there. Yeah.
And this is Apple. This is Apple App Store. So I think also there might be a way to spearhead that.
That's brilliant. With technology. I mean, there's a lot being done. Actually, I mean, Facebook is facing it right now for getting people addicted, but they give whatever sells, right? Do you want to speak into any of that? It just is what it is. Yeah.
Sally keeps passing to me because it's like my soapbox, and I'm trying really hard to not get on my soapbox about it. What I will say is that so the tech is evolving faster than we can keep up, quite frankly, especially now that there's Nudify apps, if you haven't heard of those, and AI generative technology. But to speak to the addiction piece of it, I will say that the studies in the last couple of years have been really alarming. Bear with me here for a second because this is not happy news, but essentially the child sexual abuse material, or CSAM, as we call it in the professional industry, has been getting increasingly violent, which was already occurring before the advent of generative AI. However, what we have seen in the last year is that now over 70% of the AI-generated CSAM is what they call like category A type 1, and that is the most heinous you can possibly imagine, like toddlers and bondage and all sorts of really terrible things, okay? And so we know that they're generating that, but that is part of that addiction piece, right? Because what originally satisfies in the beginning does not achieve the same effect. And then it's this increasing process of needing more and more taboo content to achieve the same high, so to speak. And then once it's at fruition, there's no higher to go except real life, right? And so it is driving the demand significantly. There are agencies that are fighting really hard to get the legislation that we need to be able to adequately address that issue. Of course, big tech is fighting back. Their algorithms, to your point, are set up to make them money, right? They are not set up for safety. So the algorithms are generating content based on the data they mine from you about what you would like, and then they suggest things to you. But with that, people then click what is suggested to them, and then it reinforces, and it becomes It's a whole algorithmic thing, but it makes them a lot of money. And so they're not a fan of changing that. One of the ways we saw big tech try to fight back was when Meta tried to make all of their messaging encrypted end to end, and that was very bad news for the industry of trying to fight trafficking and sexual exploitation of minors, because we need to be able to subpoena those chats and those conversations to prove what is happening, or to prove that CSAM is being sent from user to user and things like that. So there's a lot of fighting to regulate the industry. I know Pornhub got in a lot of trouble. There's a book called Takedown about Pornhub specifically and how much CSAM content was on their site. And when legislation was passed, was it Texas or Utah? Was it Texas or Utah? Yeah, so they finally managed to pass where they have to age verify. You know, you have to be 18 to use the site, to upload to the site, to be in the content on the site. And rather than adhering to that legislation, they closed their site in those states. They just closed it. They're like, no, we're not going to deal with that. So, you know, they're in it for money, and we have to think of it from that perspective when we're trying to fight these things. But the more regulation we can get through, the better. Regulation is also a tool for law enforcement. I know we've got an officer here, thank you. But they need those tools. And if we take away the tools, if we take away the chats, we take away age verification, how do they prosecute anything? How do they arrest, right? Like, you need evidence to do that. So yeah, I mean, to the best of your ability, I say get behind the efforts. You know, join up with an organization that is fighting the legislative fight and put your backing behind them, because every voice is helpful in that, because we're going up against money, right, in a big industry, so.
Wonderful. All right, well, we're going to be around for those of you who didn't get your questions answered. There's refreshments at the back so that everyone can leave feeling a little bit of their stomach filled. We are so grateful for your time. Thank you for not looking the other way, and we look forward to continuing engaging with you all. Bless you all. Thank you for coming.